Welcome back to TIDES. I'm your host, Shweta Malhan. And if you've been following this series with Malvika Jethmalani, you have already heard how people data is transforming HR. But today, we are zooming out even further to explore the real design challenge of our time. How do we build organizations that aren't just reacting to change, but shaping it? Because this isn't just about AI tools, it's about how we organize work, make decisions, and prepare for a world where some roles may be human, others may be synthetic, and most will be hybrid. So, in this episode, Malvika and I explore what it really means to have an AI ready HR strategy, what interim org design looks like as we move towards an AI first model, and the essential capabilities HR teams must build now and not later. So let's get into this conversation. Malvika, welcome back to Tides.
Thank you for having me. Always great to chat with you.
Likewise, and I'm really excited about our conversation today because we are diving into a future state which is not yet defined. So let's start with the big picture. AI is rapidly changing our work environment, and many companies are aspiring to be AI first organizations. In fact, if I remember Instagram as an example, that was pre-Gen AI era. And even then, it was a very lean organization, about 30 people, I assume, and when it was sold off for around $1 billion. So, given that, what's stopping organizations to become more lean as we integrate more AI into our ecosystem? So, maybe let's paint a picture to start with for our audience around what does AI first mean for an organization, and then we can get into the impacts that it has for HR the way we are today.
Great. I think this is a fantastic place to start. So, the way I think about it is, we've seen this kind of volley of AI first announcements come out from CEOs of various companies. And I don't know that I necessarily like the language AI first. To me, sometimes it feels like saying AI first could be like saying, we are email first or internet first, right? AI is a technology, in service of a technology. We are in service of our stakeholders, i.e., our shareholders, our customers, our employees, and any other stakeholders that may be in the picture given the context of your organization. So I kind of think about it as you should aim to be people led and tech enabled. So in this case, people led and AI enabled or AI powered. So that's kind of how I think about it. So if you want to be an AI enabled or AI powered organization, what does that mean? I definitely think it requires more than sending a memo to appease maybe shareholders or to create, I don't know, PR buzz. I think it requires leaders to think about AI as a strategic driver and thinking about how AI informs strategic decisions, how it guides your product innovation, and how it influences your customer experience or influences how you design your customer experience. I think the other part of being an AI enabled organization is having a data centric culture. Not that everyone needs to be a data scientist, but making sure that most people in your organization have enough data literacy to treat data as the critical asset that it is, and to um, strategically use data and to leverage data as as a means to create outsized or unique competitive advantage and to inform strategies and decisions in the future. I also think that you need to create a culture of human and AI collaboration. You outlined it beautifully, right? In the future, many jobs will be hybrid, requiring both human and AI collective wisdom. And so I think that in and of itself requires leaders to think about org design and operating models very differently. And I think the last piece of it is thinking about how do we develop a continuous learning culture? Because we're already seeing it. You and I have talked about this, the fact that so many things are changing so fast. And you might learn something new today or a technology today, and it might be outdated, months from now, or in some cases, even weeks from now. And I think organizations that cultivate kind of this meta learning mindset, learning how to learn, are really going to thrive in the future. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I agree with you. One thing that jumps out to me is when you talk about AI as a tool, from my perspective, I feel like yes, it is a tool, but it is also unlike any other tools that we've experienced in the past. So the challenge for some organizations who think of AI just as a tool could be that they start looking at how did we do tool implementations in the past and start thinking about what they do to be future ready from just that lens of past tool implementation. So you and I, when we think about tool, I think we mean something very different compared to, let's say, implementing salesforce.com in an organization. AI is not a tool like salesforce.com. And having said that, though, I feel also at the same time the organizations, I love that you start with understanding where the business is going, because the forces of change that are impacting business today might be heavily influenced by AI shaping not just the organization, but also what's happening outside the organization. Take, for example, consumer behavior change. If the promise of agents fulfills itself, then tomorrow you and I are not shopping. Our agents are shopping on our behalf. That one change has a big impact on how an organization operates, because now a marketing team and organization will not have to sell to humans directly. They are selling to machines first. And in turn, there is an impact on people in that department. So the marketing team has to rethink its value proposition. So sometimes that's where the way I see AI first organization is with the lens that if everything around us outside organization changes because of AI, how do organizations also rethink how they create value for their customers with AI in the mix?
I love all of such powerful points, my goodness. And I love this distinction of let's not think of AI as a tool implementation, because if we do apply those old playbooks, then we might make the mistake of treating the AI transformation like an IT project and forgetting that AI needs to be an interdisciplinary endeavor. And I do think that the best organizations that I've talked to that are at the cutting edge of this stuff are organizations that are thinking about AI as an interdisciplinary endeavor and thinking about the customer experience, the value creation plan, the people strategy. How do we think about our org design, learning and development, culture, leadership, and bringing all of those pieces together to figure out how do we make ourselves an AI enabled organization.
Yeah, I read a recent paper that came out from IBM, and they put it really nicely that when we are thinking about creating the future of work or new org design, we should not think about plus AI, but AI plus. Like put like if you and the way I understand it is that if we look at it as plus AI, we are thinking about the current state and then bolting AI on top of it, which to me speaks to yes, we will end up modernizing what we do. We'll be much more efficient, but it's still so the analogy I can use here is that if it's a plus AI, then we've called a renovator to make upgrades to our house. And when they're done, it looks nice. It's much more in a much more better position than before renovation, but it's still the same house. So I think of it as modernization. Whereas if we look at it from a AI plus lens, that's when you're calling an architect in and giving them a blank piece of land to say, build me the dream house. So you don't have the constraints of the current house, the firing, the framing, the plumbing, and the foundation, right? So you get to kind of play it differently. Maybe that's another way for us to look at what does AI first mean.
Couldn't agree more. In the plus AI model, you also run the risk of if you are bolting AI onto outdated operating models, the risk is that you are going to end up automating some of the dysfunction that already exists rather than first saying, what is the dysfunction? And let's shed light on that. Let's fix that. Then let's move into how AI can help us.
Absolutely. So if the organizations are now starting with outcome first and then figuring out reverse engineering from there to say what processes, what capabilities make sense for us to reach that outcome, what impact does it have on HR and CHRO specifically? because CHROs traditionally were there to look after people. And now they have to be more of systems thinker. Like they have to be the architects in many ways. What's your point of view on that?
I think the CHRO role is only going to become more and more important. I think we are moving into an era where the chief people officer role is kind of evolving into chief people and performance officer. Because really, if you think about it, HR exists. One of the reasons that HR exists is to enable great performance for the company. We need to make sure that our people are performing and therefore our teams and our leaders are performing, all ultimately in the service of business outcomes. And now, for all intents and purposes, the new workplace is the digital tools that we use. We used to gather in offices to do work. We now gather on the internet to do work. And now, of course, we're adding to the mix AI technology and agents. And so I think the first step that any CHRO needs to take is to really understand the business and to work on their business acumen. Because you can't think of AI as a strategic driver or use or leverage AI as a strategic driver if you don't understand what the business is trying to accomplish and what are the goals that we are all marching toward. Then I do think that HROs need to play a role in terms of building the AI readiness infrastructure and perhaps not kind of shouldering the sole responsibility, but certainly partnering with the CIO, with the CISO, with the chief privacy officer to make sure that we audit our data quality, we have the right governance and data privacy and security guardrails in place, that we are protecting our people's data and security, certainly our customers' data and privacy, and setting a very clear vision for what it is that we want to do with AI. And maybe even being that the voice at the table that says, do we really need to think of AI as the thing that's going to help us slash 30-40% of our headcount? Because I'm seeing a lot of CEOs kind of jump to that conclusion, right? Their initial reaction is, let's bring AI in so that we can push the magic button and roll AI out and start to slash headcount and take cost out of the P&L. And will some roles be eliminated? Or will we not need some jobs anymore as a result of AI? Perhaps. But I think if that is your first reaction as a CEO, then I would hope that the CHRO would also be that voice at the table to say, actually, how do we make our people better? How do we augment their work? How do we free up capacity for people to do the more strategic and critical thinking work so that we can deliver better outcomes for our customers, for our shareholders? I also think that it is certainly the CHRO's role to help the CEO and the rest of the C-suite team create the right culture. I've written and talked about this idea of AI-friendly cultures, right? And so what I mean by that is creating a safe environment for people to test and experiment and learn and to share their learnings and to share their discoveries, including their mistakes or what went wrong.
Mhm.
Creating an environment where you can challenge traditional hierarchy, because it's interesting that we live in a world now where the guy who runs OpenAI and you and I have access to the same model.
Mhm.
So we could come up with the same prompt, the same use cases as him. And so we need cultures where junior people who are probably going to be AI native can bring new ideas to the table without kind of fear of retribution and can challenge old perspectives or outdated perspectives. I also think that CHROs need to play a big part in the scaling phase. So helping to identify the right pilot projects, scaling those projects, and helping the leaders to think about how do we embed AI into the core business processes versus AI kind of sitting outside of our business processes as this kind of bolt-on, to use your language from earlier. And then,
Mhm.
of course, the CHRO plays a big role in upskilling and reskilling, and not just kind of rolling out a training one time and saying, okay, we're done with it, but creating, as we said earlier, this culture of continuous learning and also a culture of resilience, because a lot has happened just in the past 5 years, and so much more is going to happen as a result of AI. becoming more mainstream and being embedded into every part of the business. And some of it will be great and some of it will be not so great. We're
Yeah.
going to have a lot of hard conversations in our organizations. We're going to have to challenge a lot of old perspectives. We're going to have to reskill people who might be at risk of losing their job and as a result might lose or grieve an entire part of their identity because they're not doing a job that they sort of grew up doing in their career. And the CHRO is at the intersection of all of that.
Yeah.
Why I say that this role is only going to become more and more important and bigger.
Yep, yep. And if we take just one piece out of what you were talking about, the impact of AI on how people do their jobs today, it leads me to the next unpacking that I want to do with you around org design. Because if AI is integrated into an organizational DNA and different flavors of AI, where some parts of work make complete sense to delegate to AI, other parts, maybe there's a hybrid between humans and machines, that puts pressure on the current hierarchies in the organization. Does the current hierarchical structure make sense as we think about the future of org? And if the future of org is where we'll be a lean team with very small human footprint compared to today's organizations, how does HR need to plan differently for that? Because our current HR value proposition, our operating model, our tech infrastructure is not wired to support that kind of even interim state where machines and humans are playing together.
Yeah, I think so. The interesting thing is HR as a function and a profession is going through its own transformation. So while we are trying to figure out how do we rethink everything that we've been doing from an HR perspective and bring AI in not as a tool but kind of as a teammate, simultaneously we're also having to think about how do we help our organizations transform. So I think that we're going to have to go back to first principles and really start to ask the question why for everything that we're doing. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Why does it make sense? How does it tie to our business outcomes? How does it tie to our strategic objectives? And it sounds very simple, but it's actually very, very hard to do. The other thing that we're going to have to start thinking about from an org design perspective is in the past we didn't necessarily have a way to capture people's knowledge in an organized manner when people say left the organization or when they retired. In the future, you might have and you could have ways to essentially develop knowledge bases and for example, using AI representations of people's personas to capture their knowledge, to capture their legacy knowledge, their insights, their judgment that they've developed over time. And you might have a way to leverage that when people leave the organization. So you could have an AI avatar, for example. And if you leave your organization, your company might decide to use your AI avatar to train your replacement or train other people after you leave. Or you might even have the option to have your AI avatar be back at the office doing a presentation while you're here, in another meeting. And so what does that really mean from an org design perspective? Where do AI agents and AI technology show up on the org chart? What type of work do we want to give them? What type of work do we want to make sure is still monitored and reviewed? Because we know that in a lot of cases, AI is not 100% correct. And how will we challenge and fine tune these models if and when we discover that they are not giving us the output that we needed? Information flow is another area where we will need to think about redesign. So it used to be assumed that information sort of flows up to managers and who then decide kind of what to pass on. AI kind of blows all of that up because with the transparency and visibility that AI creates, the senior most leader in the company and the frontline employees could have and will have, in many cases, access to the same information. So what that means for org design is organizations can be flatter and faster. And I do think that I don't know that hierarchies will vanish entirely, but I think they will be based more on strategic guidance and expertise rather than controlling information flow.
So, I mean, sociocracy, holocracy, these are not new concepts. But do you think, given where we are going, these are the frameworks or concepts that organizations can start testing and piloting in smaller teams in their organizations to see how the impacts of AI can be, unpacked in a controlled environment, so to speak, as organizations move towards that future state, which is not yet defined?
I definitely think that this is the time to create safe spaces to experiment and to create sandbox environment to learn and test. And if that means testing a new kind of team operating model to see if that works for you, great. There are already organizations, Spotify is a good example, where they have this kind of interesting team structures with the bands and the squads.
Yeah.
And so you in the future, you may not really be on a fixed team. So you might have an AI agent that is kind of identifying the top priorities in the organization, scoping out projects, and then assigning people to various projects based on your expertise.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we will do ourselves any favors by thinking about org design and org structure in this kind of structured and rigid org chart manner that we've thought about it in the past. I think that we will need to start to have a more fluid org design. I also think that the role of middle managers is going to evolve. So, middle managers have played various roles over time. They play the role of coordinator, informer, monitor, coach. I do think that the human aspects of that role, the coaching, showing up as an empathetic leader, helping people develop their career and get ready for the next level, is going to become more and more important because a lot of that kind of coordination and information flow is going to be handled by AI. So, for example, we already know that performance monitoring can at least partly be automated with AI analytics, but interpreting why your metrics are what they are or how you can help an underperforming employee, it's still kind of a human art and science. And so middle managers will have to trust AI for sort of routine oversight, but redirect their energy to higher level judgment calls and cross functional collaboration.
Yep, absolutely. I don't know if you read this article that came out, I think last week sometime, where in the US, the Department of Efficiency, they have implemented an AI bot to identify which policies are they going to let go of. So I don't know where human in the mix is in that scenario, but I'm just trying to extrapolate that current state into a future state. To your earlier point, that if there are machines embedded into our ecosystem, where sometimes we delegate to machines, sometimes machine delegates to humans, that puts pressure on the organizational hierarchy. Again, you called it out that the future organizations might be flatter and the work might be more outcome based. This is the outcome we are trying to achieve as an organization. And here is a team of bots and humans who can help achieve that outcome. Now, if we take that back to HR, that puts a lot of pressure on HR as organizational capability as well. Like the current state might not be beneficial for that future state where organization is fluid, people come in, they people and machines come in and they disband, get the outcome achieved. So our current performance management systems will fail. We might not have enough intelligence to kind of fluidly design that team structure to achieve that outcome, given the capabilities we have in HR, some HR teams today, and payroll, benefits, employee relations, most of that can get automated. So, to your earlier point, I just wanted to kind of connect it back to the point that you made earlier around that HR also needs to rethink its org design and its value proposition. Does the current state of HR make sense in the future state that we are moving towards? And if it doesn't, how can HR leaders think about their AI strategy? How can they become AI enabled or AI first to support that future state, which is kind of vague? The two steps we take towards it, the more clearer it becomes, but we still don't know what's the actual future state that we are designing for. So where do HR teams start as they think about building themselves for that kind of future? and how they add value in that ecosystem?
Yeah, I think really where HR teams need to start is once you have an understanding of the organization's objectives, then you need to double click and say, okay, now what does that mean for our objectives as an HR function? And so how are we helping move the organization forward? So if your organization is trying to achieve better customer experience, for example, then perhaps what that means for HR is elevating the level of talent in the customer success organization or elevating the level of capabilities and competencies of the people within the customer success organizations. So it could be learning and development opportunities, reskilling, upskilling, working with leaders to coach them. And simultaneously, we need to be thinking about how are we automating our own processes so that we can scale our expertise. So one of the things that I am doing right now is I'm essentially trying to create a digital clone of myself and taking all of my knowledge and everything that I do and feeding it into what I call Malvika GPT
Mhm.
so that when I work with various leaders, if they would like, they can first try to work with Malvika GPT. And if they don't get the answer that they want, or if they need additional help or expertise, then they can work with me. So what does that mean for my scalability? It means that Malvika GPT could be talking to 20 different CEOs and 20 different companies versus, there's just one of me.
Mhm.
So I do think that we will have a role to play from a strategic perspective and from a human perspective. I do think AI is going to make HR more human because suddenly we're not going to be sort of poring over data and spreadsheets and trying to make a sense of engagement survey results from 4 weeks ago because we're trying to manually read every comment. Given that AI will automate so much of this stuff, I think we will, for our own profession, we will need to start to go back to the strategic work that we do and the human centric work that we do. And I think that is where we can add more value in this new era of work.
I love it. I love Malvika GPT. I would love to kind of have an interaction with Malvika GPT
I'll put
and
you to you.
see how it goes. But you're so right. Like if we project a future state of HR where 80% or 90% of what typical HR functions, I think all HR teams also sit on a maturity curve. Not all HR teams that are at the same maturity level. Some might be further ahead in terms of playing more strategically than transactional, while others might still be caught in like firefighting mode and being more transactional. But let's assume a future state where 90% of all our transactional work is now automated. Now imagine an HR leader has to go to the drawing board and think about every function that they all had in their HR team and question their relevance. Why do we need recruitment the way we do if recruitment is modernized and AI is doing the heavy lift? 80% of typical recruitment tasks are now AI driven. Does recruitment the way it sits today still makes sense? Look at L&D. L&D is ripe for disruption right now because for years we've been talking about personalization of learning, but we haven't been able to do that effectively. We've tried centralized models, decentralized models. Our HR learning L&D tech stack was so antiquated, but all of that can change. So if all of that is changing and will change and will become better, and we will be able to deliver personalized learning, what value does the current L&D team bring to the table in its current form? So all of these are things that an HR leader from my vantage point needs to start thinking about today and linking it to your earlier point to the business. Where is the business going? Maybe at a zoomed out level, think about I am going through an existential threat as HR. Why would the business need me in 5 years? What value do I provide to the business 5 years from now or 2 years from now or whatever horizon we need to plan for?
These are such important points. I also think that as HR leaders, we need to start thinking about how do we build capabilities for the future, especially in a world where the whole concept of junior entry level roles is being appended. So, many of us grew up early in our careers so I started in accounting. So I was doing manual
Mm.
ledger entries.
Mhm.
And as a junior HR professional, I was drafting policies and job descriptions and scheduling interviews. And that's kind of how I learned before they gave me the more advanced tasks. And now that all of these tasks are kind of disappearing and AI is doing all of this work, how do we bring junior talent up to speed? And especially in a world where a lot of leaders are declaring, we're not going to have junior engineers anymore. We're only going to have senior engineers because AI is doing, 50% of our coding that junior engineers used to do, for example. Well, the other part of that problem is how are you going to develop senior talent if you don't have junior talent? So
Mhm.
what does the future talent pipeline look like even? I think
Yeah.
that those are the types of questions that HR people need to start to think about now so that we don't end up in a massive talent and capability shortage years from now. Because yes, AI may be able to automate a lot of the work, but we will still need to some extent human oversight and human judgment. And even in roles where we think, yes, AI can do the work, a lot of our stakeholders are going to expect human interaction.
Yeah.
So Klarna is a good example, right? They laid off customer service people. Now they're rehiring customer service people. And they've been very open about the fact that at the end of the day, a lot of customers want to know that there's a human on the other end to help them. And
Yeah.
so when you think about your value creation and how you uniquely deliver value for your customers, we might end up in an era where your kind of free or low cost tier might be, I have an AI agent to support you, but
Mhm.
your premium tier might be you have a combination of AI and humans to support you. And that's a different world and a different set of capabilities.
Absolutely. And also coming back to HR transforming itself, we in HR also need to think about newer capabilities that we need to redesign our shop because as much as we have to support the redesign of org structure in the organization, we also have to think about how do we become AI plus versus plus AI. That takes a lot of new thinking. It takes transformative thinking for HR people to start with a blank slate and start drawing out their HR function, which might be very contextualized to the need of the organization. Maybe no two HR functions would operate the same way in the future. Who knows? But I'm assuming that there'll be nuances based on different organizations. But where I'm going with that is that it's a huge culture play within the HR team as well. So, how can an HR leader build that culture as a leverage and a superpower? Because it's not just technology. AI plus and plus AI, we are not doing plus AI. If we have to do AI plus, we have to have people think in a certain way and take risks and do things differently. Is the culture in HR ready for that? And if not, how can CHRO redesign the cultural ecosystem of their team as well, which is such a crucial ingredient, in my opinion, for this transformation to happen?
Yeah. Is it ready? Not always. I don't think so. And I think that the role of the CHRO is to help people understand not only why is this important for the business and why is it an existential threat for the business if we don't transform ourselves, but why is it a threat to us as HR professionals and as a profession and a function if we don't transform ourselves and our teams? And to help people understand that the only way to future proof your career is to continuously learn and transform yourself. And if there were ever a time to take that seriously and to reinvent yourself, it's now. And to kind of reshape the culture of the HR organization, I would also be having a conversation with my HR people about, look, this is kind of our moment. For decades, we've been bogged down by the administrative burden of our function. And this is the moment where we can actually leverage technology to do so much of that for us so that we can finally do the work that fulfills us, that is exciting to us, which is be a strategic HR business partner to the business. And so if that is the type of work you're interested in, then this is a great time. And what we're going to do for you is we're going to invest in you. We're going to create the right environment for you to experiment. test, fail, learn, but this is what we expect of you. We
Yeah.
expect of you a continuous learning mindset. We expect of you that you're going to build a certain baseline level of data literacy and AI literacy. We don't have to become AI engineers, but we do need to develop a certain comfort level with these tools. And what we do expect of you to start to have those strategic conversations with the leaders you're supporting and to ask why. Ask the question why for everything. And every time you're working on something, ask whether AI can do it better, faster, whether it can produce a V1 for you that you can look at. And so ask, how can it make your life easier? I joke about it that I take a lazy approach, and my lazy approach is, how can I get the best outcome with the least amount of work? And that's really where AI comes in. So if I can get AI to produce something for me that's 80% there, and I only have to spend an hour tweaking it, where in the past I would have spent 10 hours just creating the thing, why wouldn't I go for the 80% lazy option and take that time back to go and do whatever, invest in myself?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is also an opportunity, to your point, for HR to look at their, like, at a macro level, if they're thinking about strategic overhaul of the value prop that HR brings to the table, to look at their department from rewiring of their department from three lenses: people, process, technology. It's not a new framework. Any transformation in the past, technology transformation, looked at the situation from these three aspects. So why not look at HR from these three angles? People, the culture conversation we just had, processes, all the capabilities that sit under HR: recruitment, employee engagement, benefits, payroll, L&D, like, just pick all of these capabilities, sub capabilities that sit under your umbrella, and run them through the lens of process and question why are they still relevant, and why will they be relevant in the future? And then, of course, technology. We have the opportunity to redo the technology stack for our HR world very differently today than ever in the past. We don't have technology as a barrier. I think it's the psychology that we need to focus on versus technology this time around, because technology is becoming better and intuitive every single day. So that should not be what comes in our way, to imagine, to rethink.
Couldn't agree more. Sometimes I think the more things change, the more they stay the same. And the people process technology is such a simple framework, but so effective, and a great kind of three-legged stool to evaluate how you're doing on your transformations. And the fourth thing that I would add to that, which is underpinning everything, is purpose.
Yeah.
A lot of HR people I know are very purpose driven. They are in the profession for a reason. They want to make work better for people. They want to make cultures and organizations better for people. And I think this is a great moment to enable us to do that. So we need to ask ourselves, are we optimizing for productivity, or are we optimizing for purpose? And in a lot of cases, HR people are very driven by their purpose. So if you're a CHRO and you're kind of embarking on this journey, I would also kind of call upon you to remind your team of their purpose. Very rarely will you come across people who are like, my purpose is to draft policies, or my purpose is to answer people's questions about benefits and answer the same question 47 times in a week, right? And usually their purpose is much bigger. And I think this is a moment that enables us to finally start to achieve that purpose. And I think that's really exciting.
It is indeed. What is a typical purpose of for a CHRO today versus what should they be thinking about as their purpose tomorrow? Do you want to cover that, just to kind of close the imagination gap for our audience on purpose? Because that's such a powerful angle. The more examples we can give, I think it'll help them rethink about HR from a completely different lens versus how we are conditioned to think about HR.
Yeah. I don't know that we spend enough time as a profession thinking about our purpose in any given organizational context.
Mhm.
Because, I'm not saying that this is entirely our fault. I do think that a lot of HR people are put in very difficult positions and are from day one expected to do all the firefighting and clean up the messes that the managers made. And they're expected to plan the parties and do all the compliance stuff, and they're expected to be strategic, but they're not really always invited to the decision making table so that they can be strategic. So I think that there's a lot of headwinds that HR leaders face in terms of figuring out their purpose and executing on it. And so what is the typical purpose of a CHRO or an HR organization today? I frankly don't know, because in a lot of cases, the CEO in the organization is not even enabling an environment where we can have that conversation. CHROs I know are frankly firefighting at all times of the day and responding to urgent request after urgent request, and also having to deal with a lot of the politics and some of the ego and human dynamics that CEOs don't always want to deal with. So it kind of gets put on HR's plate. And I do think that the one thing that AI will change, that I hope it changes, is given the transparency and the visibility that AI is going to create, I do think that it will expose poor leadership more often than not. Of course, you need the right organizational infrastructure to make that happen. But if you've had leaders who have gotten ahead as a result of information hoarding or micromanaging or politics and whisper campaigns, I do think that AI will shed light on that. And as a result, I'm hoping that CHROs will be freed from, not entirely, but at least to a great extent, from having to worry about all of the politics and all the negative stuff that comes with not having an organization that is entirely focused on business outcomes. So I think that what should our purpose look like in the future? I do think it should be aligned with business outcomes and the values of the business. And how do we as HR enable the business to realize its unique value proposition or its unique competitive advantage or moat? So what are we doing from a people, culture, and now tech and AI perspective to enable that? So I think our purpose should be to drive the organizational strategy forward from people and culture and tech lens. I think that that should be our purpose, but I would love to hear your perspective. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I love the purpose statement that you have. Mine would be similar. Like, if the future state is undefined, we have to build towards an interim state, which is looking more and more like a fluid organization that has AI integrated meaningfully into its operating model. The purpose for HR would be to guide the organization through that transformation with least amount of bumps and bruises. Like, how can we make it as effective and seamless as possible? Because at the end of the day, it is not a tool integration into the ecosystem. AI is an intelligence that we are working with, and our goal would be, from a HR lens, to make sure that people are not forgotten in the mix, and people are the ones who will support the adoption of this intelligence. If there is no people adoption, I mean, if people are resisting, there is no adoption happening. You can get the best tool in the market, it is just going to sit like a shiny object. So that would be another way to look at the CHRO or HR team purpose for the next few years at least.
I couldn't agree more. I feel like right now the purpose is I just want to survive this week. That's the
Exactly.
purpose of most CHROs.
I know. I'm glad and very happy. And I'm hoping that our audience also sees the candidness with which you talked about the current state of HR, because we have high expectations, but we also have to look at the reality that we are living today. It's not like HR doesn't want to transform, but are they given the environment, the space, the tools, the resources to get their house in order, is a conversation, I guess, for another day. But as we wrap up our episode, Malvika, today, from your perspective, what would be your advice for a CHRO who's just getting started on this transformation journey and are maybe feeling overwhelmed by the pace of AI, and because of what we talked about, the current reality in which they have to operate? What would be your two or three concrete moves that you can recommend to them that will help them lay the foundation for becoming that AI first organization as an HR team?
Yeah, I would say first understand that you need to transform the mindset of your team and have a very candid conversation with them. And don't be afraid to tell them, I don't know. Because your team will likely ask you, what roles do you think will be impacted? Do you think we will have jobs 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And the reality is, we don't know. Nobody knows. What we do know is that these roles will almost definitely look very, very different from what they are today. And so urge your team to take steps in that direction toward future proofing their careers, if you will. And then in terms of tangible steps, maybe a good place to start would be document the repetitive work across not just in HR, but in each function. Review the potential kind of AI tools or technology that could help automate some of that and to help move the strategic objectives of the business forward so that you're not caught in this kind of random acts of AI, as I like to call it, and that there's a cohesive strategy and it's tied directly to your business strategy. And then maybe conduct like a 2-day, 3-day hackathon in each department. Create the time and space for people to experiment and then create a process to scope the work and to implement the promising AI tools or technology that came out of your hackathon, and then formulate an AI automation roadmap for each department and make sure that you look at the three elements that we talked about, the people, process, and the technology, and all of that underpinned with purpose in mind, not just the organizational purpose, but the purpose of each department. And I don't think that the CHRO has to go at it alone. I think this needs to be a CHRO, CIO, CEO triad. And I think if you just take those few basic steps, if you don't want to do an org wide thing, maybe start with 1 or 2 teams and then go from there and share your learnings and iterate and improve. And don't expect things to be perfect because they won't be, because there's no playbook for this stuff. These are new to world challenges that we're all trying to figure out at the same time. So I would say those are some steps that I would recommend.
Love it. Love it. And again, before I get into closing the episode, Malvika, is there anything that you wanted to talk about today that we didn't get a chance to cover?
I think we covered it all. I would just say one last time that this is our moment to be AI ambassadors for our organizations and to bring interesting perspectives, to ask the challenging questions, to be the default ethicists of our organizations as we always have been. This is our moment to shine and to demonstrate that we can, in fact, be tech savvy and we can, in fact, be strategic business partners. So I would say just embrace it and go full speed ahead.
Fantastic. Well said, Malvika. Thank you so much for this rich and necessary conversation. Today, you reminded us that the CHRO isn't just reacting to change, they are architecting the transition, not just towards digital transformation, like we talked about, but towards a new kind of organization, one where AI and humans work side by side, where the structure itself learns and evolves. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, don't wait for the perfect strategy. Like Malvika said, start with a workflow, start with a conversation, start with one AI augmented team, because the future is already here. The question is, will you design it or be designed by it? Catch you next time on Tides.